we'll have a celebration. We're going to complete not only this chapter, but the 3 chapters that are covering the talks between King Yadu and the Avadhuta Brahmin. So that's texts 32, 33. Here's the translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, this is, as you see in the image, it's Krishna speaking to Uddhava. Having spoken thus to King Yadu, the wise Brahmana accepted obeisances and worship from the king and felt pleased within himself. Then, bidding farewell, he left exactly as he had come. BBT purport. Srila Sridhar Swami gives evidence from Srimad Bhagavatam that the Brahmana Avadhuta was actually the incarnation of Godhead Dattatreya. The Bhagavatam 2.7.4 states, Yat pada pankaja paraga pavitra deha yogardhim apur ubhayim yadu hayahaya Dya. Translation. Many Yadus, Hayahayas, etc. became so purified by the grace of the lotus feet of Dattatreya, the Lord, that they obtained both material and spiritual blessings, unquote. This verse mentions that Yadu was purified by contact with the lotus feet of Dattatreya, and similarly the present verse states, Vandito Svarchito Ragya, or King Yadu worshipped the lotus feet of the Brahmana. Thus, according to Srila Sridhar Swami, the Avadhuta Brahmana is the personality of Godhead himself, and this is confirmed by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, who writes, same thing, the Brahmana was Dattatreya, for it has been said, he quotes the verse, and the translation, he left as he had come by his own will. And verse 33, translation, O Uddhava, hearing the words of the Avadhuta, the saintly King Yadu, who is the forefather of our own ancestors, became free from all material attachment, and thus his mind was evenly fixed on the spiritual platform. And Bhaktisiddhanta's translation, pretty close. O Uddhava, King Yadu, who was the foremost of our ancestors, became freed from all material attachment, so that his mind became fixed in tranquility after hearing these statements of the Avadhuta. That was the Bhaktisiddhanta's translation. Here's the BBT purport. Here the Lord praises his own dynasty, called Yaduvangsha, because there appeared in that dynasty many great self-realized kings. King Yadu was enlightened by Dattatreya in the form of an Avadhuta Brahmin who taught the king to fix his consciousness on the spiritual platform of detachment by simply observing the creation of God. Bhaktisiddhanta's gloss of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, the Supreme Lord Krishna said to Uddhava, quote, after the Brahmana Dattatreya had instructed King Yadu, he departed out of his own sweet will just as he had come. Or, here's the actual word, and we're done for this morning. Oh, Uddhava, hearing the words of the Avadhuta, the saintly King Yadu, who is the forefather of our own ancestors, became free from all material attachment and began to see everything equally. So I hope you have the same experience. Pandita Samadarshana. Now, what I'm going to do next and last to conclude this session is very kindly and very expertly, Burijan Prabhu, in his publication called The Backward Glance, which is a summary of cantos 11 and 12, has given in 3 successive chapters the 24, or he lists 25 gurus and gives a little short description of each one. So this is the backward glance on what we've been doing for 3 chapters. Summary of the 24 gurus. To help Uddhava, Krishna relates a conversation that took place between Maharaj Yadu and an Avadhuta, a spiritually exalted person not bound by cultural norms. This Avadhuta wandered fearlessly and felt a deep internal satisfaction. Maharaj Yadu asks how the Avadhuta became so enlightened without performing any apparent religious or material activities. That's from chapter 7, verses 24 to 31. Paragraph. The Avadhuta replies that he has used his intelligence to take shelter of 24 spiritual masters. Here they are. 1. The earth, as well as the mountain and the tree. 2. The air, rather than saying the numbers. The sky, water, fire, the moon, the sun, the pigeon. Parentheses. The discussion of gurus and lessons is continued in the 8th chapter. So there's 8 up through chapter 7. The python, the sea, the moth, the honeybee, the elephant, the honey thief, the deer, the fish, the prostitute Pingala. Parentheses. The discussion is continued in the 8th chapter. I think that's the 9th chapter. The kurara bird, the child, the young girl, the arrow maker, the serpent, the spider, and 24 the wasp. Thus, the Avadhuta indicates that he gained his realizations through intelligent observation of the world around him and not from other persons. The lessons from these gurus are as follows. 1. Earth, tolerance and steadfastness. Mountain, to serve others. The tree, to dedicate one's life to benefiting others. Number 2, air, detachment when contacting favorable and unpleasant things. 3, sky, the soul is always separate from matter. 4, water, remain pure and gentle. Saints are like pure water in that they transparently manifest Krishna in their hearts. And 5, fire, detachment, sometimes be visible and sometimes concealed. Saints are like fire when they act as spiritual masters and burn their disciples' reactions to ashes. Okay, that's 5 out of 24. 6, moon. The soul remains the same regardless of the body it inhabits, as the moon remains the same regardless of its phase. And 7, the sun. Acceptance of material objects to be returned to the correct person at the correct time without becoming entangled with them. Although reflected in many objects, the sun remains unchanged. Similarly, the soul remains unchanged regardless of the body it inhabits. And 8, this is from chapter 7. Foolish pigeon, never indulge in excessive affection or concern for anyone or anything. And that covers a lot of verses. It's 14 verses. That was chapter 7. Chapter 8 is called the story of Pingala. She comes at the end of the chapter. Krishna continues to relate the conversation between the Avadhuta and Maharaj Yadu describing the instructions the avatar received from 9 more spiritual masters. The python, the sea, the moth, the bee, the elephant, the honey thief, the deer, the fish, and Pingala. Summary. Python. Avoid endeavoring for material goals. Remain spiritually alert. Accept whatever food comes by destiny. 10. Sea. S-E-A. Remain deep and undisturbed. Do not rejoice when wealthy, nor feel bereft when poor. 11. Moth. Avoid attachment to women and sex, and avoid the fire of one's own destruction. Bee. B-E-E, like honeybee. Collect a little from each flower. Don't become a burden on the generous. Unlike the bee that collects honey to store it in hives, don't collect too much. 13. Elephant. Avoid trying to exploit the bodies of women for enjoyment. 14. Honey thief. One's wealth can be stolen at any moment, so there is no point in working too hard to accumulate it. Semicolon. Like beekeepers who take honey from the bees, mendicants are entitled to a portion of a householder's property. 15. Dear, do not listen to mundane songs, which can lure you to your death. 16. Fish. Don't be, quote, hooked by an uncontrolled tongue. Pingala. A lot of verses, 14, 20, 23 verses. Material disappointment is the Lord's mercy, so let it lead you toward detachment. Sense gratification steals one's intelligence, while sobriety and detachment allow one to become happy. Turn your affection away from men and women of the material world and toward the Lord, who is the real source of love and happiness. And that was chapter 8. And we just completed chapter 9. 7 more. Hawk. Material attachments lead to suffering, while renouncing desire produces happiness. 19. Child. Be anxiety-free, detached from family and public opinion, and be satisfied in the self. Girl with bracelets. That's a nice one. 6 verses. Living alone leaves one free of prajalpa and conflict. Devotees do not live alone, however, because they associate with other Vaishnavas in order to glorify and serve the Lord. Arrow maker. 3 verses for that one. Make one's consciousness steady, detached, free of the modes, and completely fixed on the absolute truth. 22. Serpent. Don't associate with ordinary materialists. Avoid having fixed residence. Wander unnoticed. And 23. Spider. The Lord, without assistance, creates the universe from his own energy and winds it up again within himself. And there are 6 verses because it's a philosophical section. And 24, he has 25. 24, insect that assumed the same form as the wasp. The jiva, under the sway of affection, hate, and fear, attains the identity of the object upon which it meditates. And then finally, 25, one's body. Detachment, because the body always comes to a painful end. Each sense pulls the mind in different directions, destroying one's peace. Actions to maintain the body manifest as the seeds of one's next material life. And then the conclusion of the chapter, which we just covered. A human birth is valuable and should be used to perceive the absolute truth and not for sense gratification, which can be obtained in any species of life. The Avadutta concludes that by learning from many gurus, he has become materially detached and free from false ego. The Avadutta Brahmana, who is actually Dattatreya Rishi, then accepts Maharaj Yadu's obeisances and leaves. By Krishna's arrangement, King Yadu thus becomes fixed on the spiritual platform and free from material attachment. Very lengthy, very detailed, very interesting, in some ways puzzling. And here's the graphic for this verse. And I didn't make the letters dark, so sorry about that. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, having thus spoken to King Yadu, the wise Brahmana accepted obeisances and worship of the king and felt pleased within himself. Thus, bidding farewell, he left exactly as he had come. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the Avadutta Brahmana is the personality of Godhead himself, and this is confirmed by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. And final verse. Oh, Uddhava, hearing the words of the Avadutta, the saintly king Yadu, who is the foremost of our ancestors, became free from all material attachment, and thus his mind was evenly fixed on the spiritual platform. Evenly fixed. Now, we just, how to do a summary, because we just did a summary. We spent 2 days discussing this verse 31, which then gets a different treatment in the next chapter, verse 5, where chapter 10, verse 5, where the apparent opposite, that is one guru, and text 31 says multiple gurus. The whole section is multiple gurus. So how does that work? So we discussed that kind of at length, and the etiquettes involved of Diksha Guru, Shiksha Guru, etc. And the responsibility, one of the nice things about the ISKCON Disciple Course is it makes it very clear that there is a responsibility on the part of the disciple to become informed and make their submission to his Diksha Guru clear. Yeah, it's in their hand to do so. Sometimes those things are done immaturely, and that's in some cases that's not a problem. In some cases it's a problem. Actually, that disciple course was intended to be taken not just as a prerequisite for initiation, but a prerequisite for taking shelter, because it should be understood at that point in time when one takes shelter and is accepted. Of course, things can shift around. Sometimes they do. But it's a commitment and a responsibility of the disciple. Not a, let's say it this way: it's not that the spiritual master needs disciples, but disciples need a spiritual master, and the responsibility lies with the disciple, not with the spiritual master, to identify. Anyway, that's a detail. These 24 are, in many cases, just simply elements, or one might say dull creatures, souls in a insect body or a snake body, etc., etc. Some are in human form, at least Pingala is in human form. And so there's gradations, but the main message is knowledge and detachment. And the benefit of knowledge and detachment is not just impersonal detachment, but detachment from the temporary to become attached to transcendence. We heard about this specifically with something I hadn't known before, Shweta Ketu from Chandogya Upanishad. And the emphasis in Chandogya Upanishad is, at least can be taken, is commonly taken as Brahman kind of detachment, not Bhagavan kind of detachment. It's to understand what is eternal, distinct from that which is temporary. That's Sankhya. And, impersonalists, they like Sankhya. Like this question, the impersonalist Kapila. Impersonalists like Sankhya. It's really complicated, and impersonalists like complicated things, and they pride themselves in delving into the complicated and using their intellect to distinguish this from that. And in the end, it's a notional, at best, a notional conception of Brahman. That's if they don't get lost along the way. A notional conception of Brahman. It's not, in other words, it's not a Brahman realization. It's a notional conception of what Brahman is not. It's not the temporary. Anyway. So this is being taught by Krishna to Uddhava, not to get to the impersonal Brahman, but to remove the obstacles so one can, exactly the same thing that happened with Yadu, fix his mind, just like it says, in material detachment, free from all material attachment, and thus his mind was evenly fixed on the spiritual platform. Or the spiritual platform for King Yadu is the absolute truth personality of Godhead. Certainly that's the message of the Bhagavatam, which is a commentary on Vedanta Sutra, meaning that's what Vedanta Sutra is indicating also. Although those that are Vedantists or Mayavadis or speculators or Gyanis, they derive a different meaning. It's not a wrong meaning, it's just not a complete meaning. The problem is when they start offending the personality of Godhead. That's the problem. Knowledge and detachment is a nice beginning. But making it the distinction between the all-powerful, all-opulent personality of Godhead and something that's of the material realm. I just this morning, hearing Prabhupada speak about it was really heavy. Mudha, the Daridra Narayan idea. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is surrounded, according to Brahma Samhita, by countless goddesses of fortune. And that same Supreme, unlimitedly opulent Lord is now Daridra. He then said, "What a concoction!" and said, "Well, anyways," he just went on. But it's so to take that knowledge and detachment in the wrong direction. That I'm God, because aham brahmasmi. I'm not the covering. I'm Brahman, therefore I'm God. Because if there's nothing more than Brahman, then you're God. And God is the poor man on the street. He's God. Daridra Narayan, worship him. You don't need to go to a temple, worship Daridra Narayan. Anyway. So let us eagerly delve into the next chapter, where this knowledge of detachment is taken to a more mature position. Like what's next? Because it's a long section. That's just 3 chapters out of 12, 13, whatever it is, chapters. Let's see if there's some discussion. And yesterday, there was a question that came at the end, and I meant to ask you to save it, and you did save it. Oh, good for you. Okay, so let's start with that one.
Question from Atulya Devidasi. Even though there is an intention to always consult with the spiritual master, but I stop myself in order to respect the time of the spiritual master.
Thank you.
How to think about it? And what if someone's initiating spiritual master is not there physically?
Well, it's not that one has to, just the preamble of the question is one should always consult the spiritual master. Poor spiritual master. Circuit overload. Rather, there are prominent things, and those prominent things, after refining with those that are your close associates and guides and friends, etc., if there is a sense that confirmation is needed, there are certain areas that are scripturally enjoined. I mean, it's right in the Bhagavatam, and that before conceiving a child, the grahastha should seek the permission of the spiritual master. That's one that's right in the scripture. There are some pretty outstanding things, and it's kind of common sense. Things that are life shaping, dramatically life shaping, should be consulted. And otherwise, be kind to your spiritual master and your masters, whoever they are, and don't overburden them. Be respectful of their time. Next. Anything here, over here?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Maharaj, this is verse 31, like the in the verse, like the other day I asked the question, and then the things we need to do but we don't do. So is it that because of weakness of heart or conditioning, the things we need to do we don't do? It's just... And
the things that we need to do and don't do, is it because of weakness of heart? That's your question? Well, what you just described is part of anishtita bhakti. There's, you know Madhurya Kandambani, right? And there's 6 characteristics of the unsteady bhakti, anishtita bhakti. And one of them is not committing, not carrying out what one one knows is beneficial, being unable to free oneself from things that are detrimental. Those are 2 of the unsteadinesses. Now, your question is that unsteadiness or that particular type of unsteadiness due to weakness of heart? And it could be that it certainly, sounds very reasonable. However, there may be other reasons. I mean, you could say it conversely, if one doesn't have weakness of heart, then one's going to do. But, hridaya daurbalya, the weakness of heart, that was Arjuna. Krishna was speaking to Arjuna, saying that was his defect, weakness of heart. And because of weakness of heart, he was reluctant to carry out what Krishna wanted. But then you can step back and say other things due to bodily conception. Thinking, virtue rests in doing the right thing and killing. So he was leaning on, if I kill these people, then their wives will be without a protector, and da-da-da-da-da-da. So, how will I be able to enjoy the kingdom? Because the people I would want to enjoy the kingdom with are on the other side. So better to just... So there's different contributing factors to why one may not do something one should do. There are different contributing factors. That's my answer.
Is free choice also is one of the contribution,
Yes.
Free will.
You can point to a particular... My answer is, you can point to a particular cause and effect. There may be multiple causes of that effect. That's my answer.
Sure. Thank you.
Question from Amaradev Dasi. Srila Prabhupada has given many analogies to establish the philosophical points. Can those items from surrounding also be categorized as gurus?
We discussed that at length the 2 previous days. And in one sense, yes. And in another sense, not exactly. And again, it depends on, how one understands or the definition of guru that one applies. So in one sense, yes. In another sense, not exactly.
Uttam Bhakta Prabhu asks, is Jiva's merging with Brahman rooted in desire to become God or incomplete understanding of knowledge?
Well, there's both, not one or the other.
Visalaksha Prabhu asks, is it correct understanding that Siksha Gurus / mentor is giving training on behalf of Diksha Guru? Ultimately, Siksha should be to take shelter of Diksha.
Two responses. Again, using this reply from the previous question, it's not that a mentor is a Shiksha Guru. Or let's say it negatively. If someone who's a mentor thinks of themselves as Shiksha Guru, they probably have a spiritual problem. And I'm pausing on purpose. Now, let's just say somebody has an older brother. And the younger brother looks to the older brother because he's the older brother. And the older brother is kind. And if the older brother thinks, look, I'm your guru, instead of I'm your older brother, it kind of messes up the relationship of brothers. Now, it may very well be that the kind of advice in circumstances between one brother and another brother is guru-like. But, so I'm refining or parsing a little bit this mentor / shiksha guru comment. I'm uncomfortable with equating the two. There may be circumstances where it is in fact the relationship, but I'm uncomfortable equating the two. And I know most of the mentors are uncomfortable with having those who they're giving mentorship to think of them as a shiksha guru. They'll say it the other way. If one is engaged in the service of a mentor and thinks of themselves as the shiksha guru of someone, they probably have a spiritual problem. And I'm pausing on purpose. But that was the preamble of the question. But the question itself says, is their function to connect them to Diksha Guru? Not their function is to connect someone with Krishna. That's a guru function, and their connecting one with Krishna should be in consonance with or transparently representative of Diksha Guru, knowing the mood and the message of Diksha Guru. Yes, they are to support, but the function isn't just to connect them to Diksha Guru. Their function is to connect them to Krishna in harmony with and fidelity with and transparently supportive of the mood and the message of Diksha Guru. So that's a better statement of what the function of Shiksha Guru is.
Uttama Bhakta Prabhu asks, I'm sure you've addressed this in the past. Can you kindly broadly mention the difference between Mayavadi and Brahmavadi and who a Brahmavadi is?
Who a Brahmavadi is, the classic examples, two of them, were before they became devotees, the four Kumaras and Shukadev Goswami. And the nature of Brahmavadi is they have realization of Brahman. And in that state of realization of Brahman, they're neutral towards Prakriti and its different stages and phases. They're detached from and neutral towards Prakriti and all of duality. They're fixed in Brahman. And a Mayavadi may be understood in a different way. A Mayavadi is not necessarily has any realization of Brahman. Commonly, the term Mayavadi means those who have embraced the conception, notional, theoretical, philosophical, Gyan-embraced conception of I belong to the category of spirit. And hence, since I belong to the category of spirit, I am that. Tattvamasi. I am Brahman. And Brahman, there's nothing but Brahman. It's followers of Shankara they prefer, what I've understood is they prefer Advaitavad. and they kind of are uncomfortable with the nomenclature Mayavad. But the Mayavad nomenclature is not just, an ISKCON, Hare Krishna thing, or even a Gaudiya thing. It existed long before. There's history without going into the history. And Advaitavad means the non-dual conception of truth or reality or what exists, the non-dual state of existence of all things. And then where you relegate Prakriti is it just doesn't exist. So it's a certain philosophical stance that where one identifies oneself with Brahman, it's not a realization, it's a philosophical position. Notional. Advaitavad or Mayavad. And Brahmavad is they actually have real spiritual realization. And such persons are not inimical. This is important. Such persons are not inimical to the Bhagavan conception, whereas Advaitavads are, because they just dismiss it. Verification of that distinction is when Shukadev Goswami and the four Kumaras came in contact with Bhagavan, they embraced Bhagavan. They're not inimical to the Bhagavan conception. They just have realization of that which is eternal, Brahman. Next. That's it. Anything else?
Of that impersonalist or the Mayavadis, what is the connection between them and this concept of Daridra Narayan? Like after they feel like they're Brahman, they find
the connection is because it's their, it's at least one branch or one group, specifically Vivekananda, but since all there is Brahman, we don't need to worship God in the temple because Brahman is everywhere, and therefore we should worship the poor man, the beggar on the street, Daridra Narayan. It's just extending the idea of Advaita and taking it to the opposite end. Narayan, anyway, the poor person is also Narayan. The tree is Narayan, the fish is Narayan. Yes? Okay.
Question from Apurva Anand. Although merging into Brahman is not the highest, this exists. Similarly, is Buddha's void philosophy correct?
No. There's no such thing. It's totally, it's not Brahmavad, it's imagination. Nirvisheshvad doesn't exist. Void doesn't exist. Now there is a Vedic notion of nirvana, but it's not Buddha's conception. You have something further? Yeah.
Question from Uttama Bhaktadas. In modern world, generally speaking, Muslims, Christians are Brahmavadis. Is that correct?
No. They have a very limited or pale conception of Bhagavan. And, that's what it is. They're not Brahmavadis. They're not realized. They're not against the existence of Bhagavan. They just have a very, limited and pale notion. Okay. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.